Hello everyone. Today we begin Unit 3 in the AP Biology curriculum. In the Campbell Biology in Focus textbook, I'm going to cover generally pages 126 to 132 and a little bit on page 141. The topic here is cellular energetics. So this whole unit is about how cells obtain energy, how energy is processed within cells. All right, some of the main points that I'm going to make today. Cells need energy to perform various kinds of work, and we'll talk about some things that constitute cellular work. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is the primary energy carrier molecule for cells. And organic molecules, primarily glucose, but not only glucose, sometimes fats, sometimes proteins, can be broken down through what we call catabolic pathways to release energy in the cell in the form of ATP. So I'd like to begin with a metaphor for energy in the cell. You can think of energy as the cellular currency. Just like we need money to survive in human society, cells need energy to survive. So if you think about money, and let's think specifically about a $100 bill, a crisp, brand new Ben Franklin $100 bill. We'd all love to have a pocket full of those. And I think we all recognize that a $100 bill represents a fairly sizable chunk of spending power. It doesn't buy as much as it used to, but a $100 bill, I think still by anybody's estimate, is a decent amount of spending power. However, as great as $100 bills are, there are plenty of situations where a $100 bill is too large of a chunk of money to spend all at once. At the end of the school day, you go down to the vending machine to buy a bag of chips or a cold drink, and if all you have is a $100 bill, you cannot spend it in that vending machine. It's too big. So sometimes it's useful to take a $100 bill and get change. Hand a $100 bill to a bank teller or a cashier and say, I'd like 100 $1 bills, please. Of course, it's the same amount of money. It's the same spending power. But you see my point. $1 bills are very spendable. There's virtually no place where you cannot spend a $1 bill. And so sometimes it's better to have your spending power, your money, your currency in small units so that they're more usable. Energy works the same way. So glucose is the primary fuel that cells access for energy. And glucose represents a decent amount, a fairly large chunk of energy. Lots of energy is stored in a single glucose molecule. The problem is that's way too much energy to be used all at once. When cells need to access energy to do active transport or protein synthesis or cell division or any of the things that cells do that require energy, they need that energy to be in a small, usable unit. And so just like we can take a $100 bill and cash it in and get $1 bills, glucose can be cashed in and broken up into small units of energy called ATP molecules. And a pretty good estimate is a cell can obtain a maximum of 38 ATP molecules from the breakdown of one glucose. Now that's assuming that a whole bunch of things go exactly perfectly. That's kind of the maximum. Usually it's not quite the full 38. We'll get into that eventually. But the idea of cellular respiration, there's a process that happens inside your mitochondria called aerobic cellular respiration, and it uses oxygen to efficiently break down glucose in order to get these small usable units of energy that we call ATP. Okay, so why do we need ATP? Why do cells need energy? Cells need energy to do work. And there are three general categories of work that takes place inside cells. The first is called mechanical work. This is physical labor. This is where something inside the cell is moving or being pushed or pulled. So contraction of muscle cells, the beating of cilia, which pushes a paramecium through its watery environment, or anytime cells divide and we have to move our chromosomes around, pull the chromosomes apart inside the cell, that process is called mitosis. All of those are situations where some sort of physical labor or movement is taking place, and those all require energy. We call that kind of work mechanical work. Now there's transport work, such as active transport. You already know about this, where special carrier proteins use ATP energy to move ions against their concentration gradient. So we talked about the sodium-potassium pump recently, which uses ATP to push sodium ions to the outside of a neuron and at the same time push potassium ions to the inside of the neuron cytoplasm. That takes energy. That's active transport. Endocytosis, exocytosis also would be types of transport that do require ATP. And finally, we have chemical work. This is any sort of chemical reaction where ATP is going to be needed. So synthesis, which means the building of molecules, like protein synthesis or DNA synthesis or lipid synthesis. Anytime you're building something, that takes energy. Bioluminescence is the unique ability that some cells have to produce light, to release energy as in the form of light. So when a firefly or lightning bug kind of glows in the night to attract a mate, or in Finding Nemo, the anglerfish that lives way down in the depths of the sea and uses its little glowing organ on its head to attract prey. That's bioluminescence. That's living organisms lighting up, and that requires ATP energy